Good morning. This is a rather sort of surprise for me because I'm not used to speaking without a little lapel mic, which allows you to juggle both script and mind at the same time. I'm glad to see so many people here. Actually, I can't see you because of the light, but I'm glad to sense so many people here. I'd like to thank the team for helping us to sell out over the 2 days. That's fantastic. There's no doubt that wearable technology is a hot topic. First of all, I need to thank the European Regional Development Fund. They've basically paid for these 2 days, and they're contributing not only to this event, but also to the incubator that we run here at Ravensbourne for small companies. So thanks to the ERDF, that's fantastic. I'm also very grateful to the sponsors. That's Ogilvy Labs. We have a fantastic relationship with Ogilvy down at Canary Wharf, with IC Tomorrow, and of course the Royal Borough of Greenwich, bless them. So the local authority really matters to us, and I want to build our relationship with you if you're here. Thank you. Thanks also to our media partners, DZine and Postmatter. You'll have seen the press coverage, that's great. And to the people at Ravensbourne, Cassie, Amanda, Carrie, and others who've made this all possible. That's all the thanks out of the way. I started out in my own career in electronic hardware and computing. Actually, I was lucky enough to be able to wear my third-year project at university, though that isn't really what it was designed to do as a video switcher. I moved into television filmmaking, then the slightly crazy world of online, then dabbled in animation, and then botanical science, and then the sort of crazy processes of democracy, which I'm involved in now. As I've moved to and fro between the so-called creative world and the so-called technological one, I've realized that the most interesting things seem to happen at the boundaries between things, between worlds, between politicians and the press, at the edges of countries, between skin and skin, on the surface of a leaf, or between one culture and another. And that's why I think Ravensbourne itself is a bit special. We have stellar alumni like David Bowie, Stella McCartney, Bruce Oldfield, who have profoundly influenced the world of fashion. And we also run fabulous courses, and we have alumni from areas like broadcast engineering, broadcast computing, photography, motion graphic design, in product and interior design, and even sound design. We don't just offer degrees, but we have people coming in and out from every industry, doing short courses or having their fledgling companies nurtured and incubated. The juxtapositions here between talented people from different disciplines, those juxtapositions are really special. And when I think about fields that epitomize those juxtapositions, the boundaries between worlds, if you like, what better example is there than what this conference is all about? Wearables. Almost by definition, wearables are what lies between us and the worlds we inhabit. They're exciting because they're on our own boundaries, and exciting now, of course, because they sit on the edge of the known and the unknown. Wearables imply facility with aesthetics, with design, with fashion, and of course with technology. Goodness knows we've got plenty of wonderful technology in this building. I hope you get to play with it. So wearables and Ravensbourne, I would say this, but a perfect fit, I think. But this is an experiment for us. It's the first time Ravensbourne has done this particular event. We have lots of other events going on, but this one's new. And in the spirit of this experiment, please do me a favor. In the infuriating, lovable way that human beings have, we'll screw up from time to time. I'm sure we'll make mistakes here and there. And we could be better at what we do. At the end of this conference, or during it, tell us at least a couple of things we could alter to make things even better next year. Because I really hope that with your feedback, this will become a yearly event. Ravensbourne, as I said, has all sorts of events throughout the year. And I hope some of the companies in this room might join our growing band of commercial partners. You and your staff will learn a lot, so will we. It'll be good for your business and a heap of fun. And together, perhaps we can make the world a slightly better place. Let me finish by welcoming you once again. Learn well, talk to people you wouldn't otherwise have met, And remember to tell us what you think. I'd like to hand back to Tom Rowley, who's hosting the 2 days. Thank you, Tom. He's an expert in wearables design, including with Triumph, actually, the bra company. I realise there's enormous scope now for puns and innuendo, which, being new to Ravensbourne, I'll clearly try to avoid. I hope that you'll keep abreast of new technology while you're here and find that the whole event an uplifting experience. Tom.
Thanks very much. Thanks. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so I've got a bit of juggling to do as well. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and thank you for coming. So as Jonathan alluded to, my role over the 2 days is host. So I'm going to kind of pop up in between the talks, and this afternoon I'll be doing a summary and some reflections on the day, and I'll be doing that tomorrow too. I also need to introduce Gabrielle Miller. Gabrielle is from Wearable Futures, from the Wearable Futures team, and she's going to be running the room upstairs, the core. So yeah, that's from about, I think from 10:30, isn't it, this morning? Or 11 o'clock, sorry, get the timing right, yeah. So we've got the two sort of main rooms here, are this one, which is Universe, and then upstairs on the second floor, we have the core. There'll be talks going on throughout the day in both rooms. The fundamental difference is that the sessions here are a bit more formal. So there are panels, and then there are kind of spotlight talks. They're called. They're a little bit more formal. Some will have opportunities for Q&A. Some won't. And then upstairs in the core, it's a bit less formal. It's a bit more conversational, and people can get a bit more involved. So that's the difference between the two. And you've been encouraged to shuttle between the two. I think that's the intention. There are lots more things going on in the building too. There's tons of stuff happening across the building. So we've got the research library where we'll have academic papers being presented tomorrow. That's tomorrow afternoon, and that's on the second floor. There's also Dressing Up the Future, which is just outside. There's a space outside, and that's going to be, you can look and touch and feel some new things that are being developed. We have a wearables lab upstairs as well, where you can go to start to make your own prototypes and start to kind of explore different materials, textiles. And what you can do is if you've got, if you come up with something great, if you've got a burning idea that you want to prototype, you can take it into the competition, a challenge competition that we're doing with Rework that will start lunchtime today, and that will be on level 1. So if you do want to make something, if you want to participate in that competition, that challenge, the winners of that challenge, they'll go into the Wearable Cities event that's happening at the end of the week, and there'll be prizes. So check that out, level 1, at lunchtime today. Just some more kind of things. Sorry, this is a long list, but there's a lot going on. Tonight there'll be an open mic event as well that will be happening, where people can talk about their own projects. So if you've got things that you want to share, if you want to kind of involve people, then you can go upstairs and talk. There'll be drinks too, which is a further incentive to go to that. That will be on the 4th floor. And then tomorrow night, the whole event will culminate with the Futures 10, which will be where there's a series of prototypes that have been developed by some very creative people, and it's a showcase for those, and there'll be drinks there too, and that's on the 4th floor as well. So that's those are the sort of core events that are happening over the 2 days. I'd encourage you to kind of explore them all. And the point of the exercise is very much about kind of cross-fertilization, pollination. As Jonathan referred to, this is about boundaries. We're at the start of something here. We're at the start of a new category, and therefore the interesting bits, the innovation comes from those, from where we see kind of new connections and new developments. And it's also, it's not just about the innovation. It's also, very much there are talks across the 2 days which talk about the social impact, and we need to think critically about this as well, because there are, broader implications here, as there are with any new technology and new development that we need to to think about and reflect upon. So think about that too over the course of the days, and there are obviously going to be some chances to interact and discuss and to learn as well. So if you are kind of going upstairs or going to another room and you're torn between two fantastic talks, maybe one here and one upstairs, all the talks will be recorded, they'll be streamed, you can access them after the event. And we'll be summing up in here, and we'll be summing up everything that's happened over the course of the day as well at the end of the day. So don't worry about missing things. There's a hashtag I need to point you to. Everyone here should understand what that means and what to do with it. I'd encourage you to use it and share the great news of what's going on here. Other kind of housekeeping things I need to share with you. Sorry, the list goes on. There are exits here and here. I think everyone can see them. If the fire alarm goes off, it's for real. It's not a test. So in a very orderly way, please move out of the building. What else do I need to say? If you've got questions, there are people with Wearable Futures written on their T-shirts, and I direct you to them or to me if you have questions, and I'll point you to the right people. And that's pretty much it. That's my list done. I had 11 things. I think I've covered them all. And now I will hand over to Olivia, who's going to chair the first panel session, which is talking about wearables, past, present, and future. Olivia is the deputy editor of wired.co.uk, so I'll hand over now.
Great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so this panel, we're just going to be sort of setting the scene for the day before you go off into the various different rooms. And as Tom said, we're talking about the past, present, and future of wearables. I'd like to quickly introduce all my panelists onto the stage, and I can give them a little introduction before each of them's going to do a short kind of 10 to 12-minute talk, and then I'm going to ask them a few questions. So if I can just invite Clara, David, and James up onto the stage, and I will give them their little introductions. Ooh, thank you. So on your right, we have Clara Gaggero, who is the founding member and director of a UK design and innovation studio called Vitamins. And she's going to be talking about the history of wearable technology. And it goes back a lot longer than at least I knew about. Secondly, we're going to have, hang on, a different order. We're going to have David Benn, who's sitting on the very left, who is business development manager at Foursquare. And he leads the mobile and wearable partnerships from the company's New York headquarters. Now, he's going to be talking about the very current kind of commercial market for wearables. And finally, we're going to have James Bridle, who's sitting in the center. He's an artist, technologist, writer, and publisher. And he's written about literature, culture, and networks for a range of publications, including Wired, The Atlantic, The New Statesman, and The Observer. And he'll be providing quite a provocative viewpoint about the future of wearables. And each of them are going to come on stage and do a short talk. And there isn't going to be opportunity, sadly, to do Q&A with the audience. But if you tweet me at Olivia_Solon, I might be able to squeeze a few of the questions in at the end. But first of all, we're going to introduce Clara, who's going to talk about the past of wearables.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Olivia, and thank you all the organizer of Wearable Futures. Today, I'm going to talk to you about something different. I'm going to talk to you about the past of wearable technology. I usually talk about the future most of the time. As Olivia said, I'm one of the co-founders of Vitamins, that is a design and invention studio based here in London. Can you hear me well? Yeah? Good. At the core of Vitamins, mamma mia, wow. At the core of Vitamins, there is a very multidisciplinary background. So we are 3 directors, as we said, and Adrian, that is going to talk later today, has a background in electronic engineering and magic. He's actually one of the members of the Magic Circle now. Duncan is going to be talking tomorrow. He has a background in mechanical engineering and ergonomics. He worked at Renault before joining Vitamins. And I have a background in fashion and in product design. I actually used to run a fashion brand in Berlin before coming to London. So these really helped us in working with wearable technology. These are some of the products that we have done. And we had the chance to work across very different markets and disciplines. So we did projects that are sports telemetry, transport, medical products, but also all the way across working in beauty and fashion. But the project that I want to show you today, before we go into the past of wearables, is the project that is the closest to my heart. We did this project to BlackBerry, for BlackBerry in 2010, and it's called Skin Display. Skin Display is an invention that aims to give more resolution to digital interruption. So you know when you are in a meeting or in a romantic dinner and your phone buzzes in your pockets and you don't know if you want to answer this call or not, if this call is important. We invented a way to check your phone without taking it out of your pocket and making an informed decision. So in this case, Laura, that is in a meeting, can just put her hands in her pocket, press on the device, and a raised message will be imprinted on her fingers. So then she can quickly make a decision if the call is important and if she needs to interrupt the meeting and take the call. When we presented this to BlackBerry, we thought it was the end of our relationship. But actually, instead, they patented it, and maybe in the future we'll see it out there. The interesting thing of Skin Display, and the reason why I'm putting it here today, is because it looks at the social etiquette, like the emerging digital etiquette around these mobile devices that now live on our body, in our pockets, but also is using the skin as the most wearable screen, the most wearable display you can have. And this really shows how I like to define wearables, so things that are not just a piece of clothing, but all the way, very, very close to the body. This is probably because of my background. I grew up in a tiny village in Italy, on the mountains of Italy, and as a proper cliche, my mom had a fashion shop, and my dad used to design and build cars, for Fiat, Ferrari, etc. Perfect cliche. But the interesting thing, I think, that really influenced my vision on wearable. I didn't really see a difference in between these two things. You wear a piece of clothing, but then you also wear a car for a period of time when you're actually driving somewhere. So I like to extend the definition of wearable to all the things that surround your body for a certain amount of time. So from piece of clothing all the way to cars and maybe even rooms, if we want to be very broad. And also, if we bring it closer to the body, then you can have wearables that are actually embedded inside your body, like in this case, a cochlear implant. So I like you to think about wearables in this very, very broad way. And not only, actually, it's very good if we think that wearable can have different functions. So there are wearables that are extremely expressive, like, for example, a piece of clothing. And there are wearables that are extremely functional, like the cochlear implant. So having said this, I'm now going to show you the history of wearable. And I'm going to start with a group of wearables that, in my opinion, are expressive. So the human mind has always been very creative. And one of the first examples of expressive technology, I think, comes from the time of Nefertiti. So very, very long time ago, 350,000 years before Christ. In ancient Egypt, looking beautiful and being attractive and being an hygiene was a very high priority. Every wealthy person would be washed every morning in aromatic oils, and they would shave completely any hair to be super, super clean. The interesting thing is that they would wear wigs and makeup, but then also a little invention, a little wax cone that they would put on top of their wigs. You can see it there, actually, it's even in the picture. That, thanks to the warmth of the body and the warmth of the environment, would melt and not only relieve them from the itchiness of the wig, but also perfume the environment and send a beautiful perfume around the person. So this was helping them to look and feel as beautiful as possible. If we jump thousands years ahead, then we have wigs being still one of the most expressive wearable accessory. Wigs, so the man in this picture, at the time of the painting of the portrait, he was 29 years old, okay? It's not that he was aging very quickly, it's that he was wearing a white wig. At the time, you have to think, in society, aging was a symbol of wealth. Aging was a luxury that only few people could have. So fashion was helping you to show that you were wealthier than you were. So now we all want to be super young and super skinny. At the time, they really wanted to look older. So what they did, they drank vinegar to look paler. They would use like lead-based moisturizer, again, to look paler. And then they would wear white wigs. Just to show that they were older. Also, depending on the wigs, you could recognize the profession of the wearer. So there was also sort of social code in society. After, I'm again jumping few hundred years ahead, and I'd like to show you the first portable expressive technology. In 1915, the first metal lipstick holder was patented. So before lipstick were kept in a sort of paper, wrapped in paper, until that point when someone invented a metal holder. And that was great because finally, you know, people could bring lipstick with them in their bag, in their pocket, around, and make sure they were pretty all day around. After this, another, again, you know, the wearable technology was always coming to help people to look beautiful and to feel more attractive. As society changed, these things changed, this new invention appeared. And now I want to show you something that, again, is debatable. Is this a wearable technology? I think, you know, there is something in there. The shoulder pad. In the 80s, showing power and showing control was super, super important. So fashion and wearable accessory came to help. And the shoulder pads was invented. So you have these amazing, like, you know, American Gigolo and very, very different cut in fashion. But so what is fashion? What is being expressive? And what is the dream of fashion right now? I really like this video from Lacoste. They try to show how wearable and how beauty should be, you know, could be now. And they reinvent the polo by making it into something that is constantly changing, constantly updating, not only in the color, but also in the shape, as you will see very soon. And this is almost like a constantly evolving Facebook status, but that you wear. So it's really like the digital and the physical merging. So this is very interesting, and maybe this is what very soon we will be able to do. But now let me show you another category, and sorry if I have to jump quite quickly in between decades, but it's quite tough to show you like thousands of years of wearable technology in 10 minutes. But let me show you the functional section. So one of the first functional accessory wearable that I found in history is the plague doctor mask. This is actually the equivalent of a gas mask, let's say. At the time, people thought that the plague was, that you can get the plague just by inhaling bad odors. So what they would do for the doctor, they would create this beautiful mask and they would fill the beak with herbs and scents so the doctor would not get infected, they thought. Unfortunately, they weren't right. But this, again, had a double function. It was really functional. It was thought to be really functional. And also, it helped people recognize who the doctor was and letting them help you. Also, another beautiful invention that is dated 1644 is the abacus ring. So the abacus ring is actually recognized as the first really wearable computer. These helped people in the Qing dynasty to do calculation on the move quickly and be ready for their transaction and deals at the markets. So these inventions actually evolved and are still present in our pocket with the calculator on our smartphones, but probably the boom of this wearable calculator happened in the 80s. These are all super fun examples. Actually, in the 1970, the first wearable calculator was invented, and it was a necklace calculator, not a wristwatch, as many people think. Then there are many different examples of wearable and portable calculator. So there is a pulsar watch here, and then this one that is called the calculator is it wasn't just a calculator and a lighter, but also an alarm clock. So you can, it's almost like a pre-iPhone. Then we had the map, the city, Manhattan City Key. This little card-size calculator could tell you which was the nearest crossing in Manhattan. So you just type in the streets where you want to go, and the calculator would tell you the nearest big intersection. So it's actually a precursor of the Google map. Now I want you to think again about the mask of the plague doctor and see how that was protecting us from the invisible. It was one of the few things that people invented to protect ourselves from invisible forces. There has been lots of development in that side as well. I picked 3 projects, 3 of my favorite. One is called the first one is called the TaiCam hat, and it was done in 2007. And it's a hat that responds to changes to the surrounding radio signals. So it really tries to make the user more aware of the electromagnetic radiation in our environment. The second example is the Malignant Mole Bikini by Fiona Carswell. And these bikini start to show malignant or black moles when you have been for too long in the sun, trying to make you more aware of the damages you can make to give your skin. And then there is the sensor glove. This is actually something that has been created very recently, this year. Yes, and it changes color when the wearer is in the presence of toxic, hazardous substances that cannot be detected with our senses. And what I really like about these things is that they all try to protect us from invisible things, and they, humans look at wearables for protection as well. And interestingly enough, now you start seeing these sort of examples. So this is an anti-drone hood that has been invented by Adam Harvey, and is actually using highly metallized fibers to reflect heat, thereby masking you from the drone's surveillance. So this is probably the new emerging fear, privacy and being looked at the whole time. So now wearables are trying to solve that problem as well. So this brings us to the end of the very super short introduction to the past of wearable technology. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you like the span on the range of proximity to the body. We saw things that were embedded in the body, all the way to things that are surrounding the body or live in your pocket. We saw very expressive examples like the Nefertiti cone, perfume cone, all the way to very functional example like the cochlear implant. And I'm sure that during these 2 days of conferences, you'll see hundreds of interesting future or present inventions. So thank you very much. And I hand you over to Olivia.
Yes. Thank you very much, Clara. Well, I won't get up because please take a seat. I won't get up because I'm about to introduce David Ban to the stage from Foursquare.
Good morning, everyone. Great, so I'm Good morning, I'm David Ban. I'm here from Foursquare. First, before I get started, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the present state of wearables. As Olivia mentioned, kind of sort of taking a bit of a slant towards the consumer, sort of mass-produced electronics approach that we're seeing right now. First, I'd like to thank everyone for getting me here. Really appreciate the invitation. Cassie, Olivia, Gabby, everyone's involved with the conference. Really excited to kind of learning with all of you over the next couple of days. So by way of a quick introduction, as Olivia mentioned, I lead mobile business development at Foursquare. So sort of my mandate is basically working with hardware manufacturers, primarily mobile devices, hardware, as well as wearables, which is sort of a recent development over the last 6 months or so, started becoming more of a focus for Foursquare, as well as mobile operators, which is sort of the old guard, a little bit interesting, different direction there. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Foursquare, have some sense of it. Hopefully we have some users in the room as well. But it may not be immediately clear to everyone sort of why we're taking this interest in wearables and why it's a space that has become a bit of a focus for some of us over there. So I just thought I'd give a quick introduction of the product to make sure we're on the same page before I kind of move into some of the trends and the insights that we're seeing in the space. So Foursquare is essentially our core product is a mobile app, cross-platform mobile app that helps you make the most of where you are. So we do this by providing these contextual recommendations that are pretty much based on your behavioral patterns from checking in, from things you've liked, as well as those of your social graph, bringing in all of the activities that your friends and your friends of friends have done, as well as just kind of analyzing much broader insights that we kind of can collect from a lot of the data we see from activity around the world. There's a couple of ways in which this works. The sort of traditional method that Foursquare has always operated is that you can search for something, and it provides you with a very highly localized contextual recommendation based on time of day, based on usage patterns and trending, sort of what's trending in the area you're in. But recently we've started to develop sort of a passive technology, and this is sort of what we think we're really excited about. It's only in the last couple of months we started rolling this out. But what you're able to do is really just have Foursquare kind of living in your pocket, not even needing to take the phone out, and we'll actually push you a push notification, basically buzz your phone when we have something interesting and relevant that's around you. So it's become a way for us to bring a little bit of the magic of what we're able to do with all the data science and the data that we have, and put that into our users' hands in a way that doesn't require them to take quite as much action as they might have had to take to see these kind of recommendations. So we're a 4-year-old company based in New York. We have an office in San Francisco as well as an office in London. Happy to have one of my colleagues, David, here from our London office. And we have around 175 employees, primarily engineering and product. And we've kind of amassed this amazing trove of data over the last 4 years. We have around 4.5 billion check-ins from our 40 million users around the world. These users have created 30 million tips, which are very short, highly actionable recommendations at our locations. They've added 100 million photos, and all of this is kind of appearing at around 50 million points of interest or Foursquare locations around the world. So we have this great data base, and what are we doing with all of this? So these are a few of the apps that are currently using Foursquare data through our API. We've taken a very open approach from pretty much the beginning of our company to make our data, our database, and our recommendations available to developers around the world. So the way this works is basically it's partly our venue database. They can pull in our points of location to power sort of a location layer for their own services, as well as really tapping into some of the algorithmic recommendations that are really the kind of the secret sauce of what we do and what all of our engineering is focused on. One big example here I'll point you to, which many of you have probably used in this room, is Instagram. If you've ever tagged a location for a photo on Instagram, that is being powered exclusively by Foursquare's venue database. So on a monthly basis, we see around 100 million people that are using our API and our technology via these apps that developers around the world have built, which is really exciting. So I think that this maybe is starting to become a little more clear where we're coming at this space from and why we feel so bullish about wearables. It's been something that our founder has been really passionate about from the get-go and something we're excited about. In general, we're trying to provide these little pieces and moments of magic for our user base where they can kind of just feel the world around them come to life and find out about things they might not have known. And when it comes to the delivery method for this, I think that we'd all agree that spending hours a day staring at a small piece of glass that comes out of your pocket probably isn't the future. And if we can find a more elegant, a little bit more personal way of providing this information to our user base and to a larger audience around the world, then that's really compelling to us, because then it does start to actually sort of make the world around us come to life in a little bit more seamless way. So with that said, as I said, around the last 6 months or so, I've started having more conversations with a lot of the big players in this space. And as Olivia said, this really is predominantly sort of the consumer electronics space. And you know, a number of trends have kind of emerged, and there's 3 in particular today that I think might be interesting for this audience. So the first one is that when we look at hardware and what's currently in the market and how it's being used, I think there are sort of 2 flavors, I guess I'll say, of devices and what we're using these for, and I'll go into that in a minute. That being said, when it comes to hardware, I don't think we're at an end state here. I think we're seeing sort of an intermediate period of the type of technology that's being put into consumers' hands. And it's really what's happening is we're training ourselves and we're training the entire industry as to how to look at the space and how to think about these devices. And lastly, if the hardware is really not, you know, kind of the end state right now, where is really the innovation coming from? And from our perspective, that's coming from services. You're going to see in the near term a lot more excitement around the types of software that's being built to integrate some of the information we're getting from these devices. And I think that's probably where we're going to see a lot of the exciting developments in the next couple of years. So that being said, I'm going to jump into just sort of a landscape view of what's going on in the hardware space right now. Just out of curiosity, I'd love to see a show of hands of anyone who owns a wearable device, something that's purchased in a store these days. All right, cool. That's a decent number. Yeah. So when I look at these devices, it's kind of it's become clear that there's maybe 2 schools sort of here of ways these devices are being used and marketed. And I like to think of that as informing and distilling. So on the inform side, here we have devices that basically are providing us with data about ourselves or about the world around us that might not be readily available. So primarily this is sort of the fitness tracker, activity tracker market, where we're getting a sense of you know, how many steps we're taking, what our biometrics look like, how healthy we are, how we're sleeping, things like that, and then a little bit of analysis and sort of UI on top of it just to make it a little more actionable for us to drive some behavioral change. Probably a lot of you are very familiar probably with some of the names on this list from that standpoint. On the other side of what I like to think about distilling, these are really devices that are focused on curation and filtration of existing data that we're pretty much already getting from other sources. And that primary source is our phones, obviously, and to this day, a lot of these devices are dependent and function, you know, in congress with our phones. They're really based off of the phone's data connection and the apps and the services. Sort of the goal of these, obviously, is more to create sort of a more seamless interaction with the technology around us and to help us kind of navigate our way through the world with a little more grace, perhaps. Sort of the Pebble Watch, which I have one on my wrist right now, kind of speaks to a different sort of solution to what Clara just mentioned with the skin imprint technology, although looking at your wrist might be a little less slick than just looking at your finger. Sort of the big names here, Google Glass obviously is sort of a flagship device that's kind of leading a lot of the public mind share about this space. We also have a lot of watches. It's really sort of the march of the smart watches here. Pebble is a very light OS that's really sort of an interface for a lot of the notifications and things like that we're getting from our phones, although they are moving into watch-specific apps as well. And then we have similar devices from Samsung and Qualcomm that are more full-featured OS-based devices that they're kind of running a little bit more processing power and can do a little bit more. So the one thing that's kind of uniform about these devices is that they really have the same goal of providing a benefit to us, right? Improving our daily life in some way, whether that's driving behavior change to improve our quality of life, or just increasing productivity and making it a little bit easier for us to interact with all of this, you know, massive inflow of data that we're all being subjected to. So with that being said, how are they doing in this sense? I think that even the most diehard wearables fanboy out there would probably acknowledge that the class of hardware that we are currently seeing isn't really yet so invaluable as to be absolutely essential to our daily lives and to our well-being and to the way we navigate our worlds. There certainly has been a lot of progress made, and the sensors that are in these devices are quite accurate and are producing compelling data. But for me, what's really exciting about where we are right now is that it's kind of a training phase, if you will, for the way that the consumers and manufacturers are thinking about this whole space. And what I mean by that is that we're being forced to think about what role these devices play in our lives. It's certainly a new field, although we've been wearing things on our body for a long time. We haven't had this sort of interaction where there's really as much technology being baked into these devices. It's sort of some of it is conversational based, and we're being forced to really discuss these issues. But a lot of it, I think, is almost like an indoctrination period where we're kind of just being bombarded with this notion of, hey, we're going to be wearing things on our body. Let's get used to it. Let's start thinking about what we want to get out of these devices, how much input we want to put into these devices, how much input we should put into these devices, sort of the balance between comfort and convenience in a lot of these devices. To me, it's forcing us to kind of have this conversation, which is often just internal. So it's not just the users that are being trained, it's also the manufacturers. And I kind of put these two pictures up here just by way of illustration of kind of what you might call the identity crisis that I think some of manufacturers are having. So here you basically have two devices that have near identical sensor technology, predominantly pedometers with some accelerometers and altimeters, things like that, but taking very different approaches to how they're approaching the consumer, right? So on the left you have the Nike Fuel Band SE. This is actually the limited gold edition that just came out. And you can see it's really being pitched as sort of a lifestyle accessory, right? And on the right you have a Fitbit clip-on device that highly functional, obviously function over form. So that's kind of where I see the hardware market right now and how we're viewing that. Now the question is, if the innovation isn't coming from these devices right now, and if we're not really there yet in terms of the real future on our wrist or in our pocket, where are we going to see a lot of the innovation in the near term? Where are we going to see this excitement coming from? And for me, it's going to be services. And there's a couple reasons. One is that hardware, we're seeing tons of launches, but it is a slow-moving industry. And while we do have a lot of new devices coming out, especially Q4 holiday time, there's certainly not the kind of large-scale breakthroughs on an incremental basis that we'd like to see. The one maybe exception to this is Google Glass, which I think has taken a very different approach to a new novel sort of form factor. That said, very much in beta, and the response has been controversial, I think, to say the least, and still to be seen how that's going to be adopted on a mainstream basis. That being said, there's also really a lack of standardization that I think makes it easy for hardware advances to occur as quickly as we'd like. And what I mean by that is that whether that's me hitting my 12,000 step goal on my Fitbit and not really knowing what that means, or if that's that the smartwatch manufacturers don't really know yet how much processing power, how much battery life is appropriate for these kinds of things. It just is kind of stymieing a little bit of, I think, the innovation that's gonna be the massive jumps that are gonna make this really, really exciting and take off as a huge segment of the technology market. So with that in mind, to me, the solution here is sort of what I like to call creativity and combination. And that's bringing together different data sources that might not ordinarily interact with each other to kind of produce some sort of sense about our daily lives or our worlds that's going to be interesting in driving behavior and forcing us to think differently. To kind of wrap up, I'll mention a little bit about what we're doing with Foursquare, because this is exactly kind of this direction we're trying to go in, and we think we can influence the market in. So we obviously know a great deal about our users' behavior, types of places they go to, but we don't really have any inputs about so many other elements of their lives, their health, their sleep patterns. So take sleep, for example. You can imagine a world in which we know, hey, you had a pretty lousy night of sleep last night. Might be able to suggest, hey, why don't you check out one of these few coffee shops that are a few blocks away from you, and some of your friends have recommended. Very seamless, doesn't require you to pull up anything or click any buttons. We're just telling you, hey, this is a fact, here's some coffee. Kind of slightly different direction, we're also really interested to provide the data that we do have to some of these wearables companies and help them kind of give you a little bit more context around what's going on. So one way I'd like to think about it is, let's say you've been really on a tear the last weekend, right? You went to like 10 bars in 7 days, in 3 days, let's say. Really a big bender. This is the kind of time when maybe your watch should be telling you that it's time to go to get a little exercise this afternoon, right? Might make you feel better. And if we kind of expand this a little bit and we start bringing in some more inputs and we do a little bit of pattern analysis and we get the user to kind of provide a little bit more data on themselves, you might be able to say things like, hey, in the past when you've had these massive 3-day stretches, what's really impacted you is being able to go to let's say a yoga class the day after. We've seen that improving your biometrics, we've seen that improving your sleep and your heart rate. So hey, we see you're free after 3 p.m. today. Class at that studio you like to go to on Tuesdays is actually available. Click this button to sign up. So I think that you can see a way in which if you pull a few different sources together here, it can really be powerful in influencing the way we go through our days. So that's all I have. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out. Would love to continue the conversation via any other means. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I think 10 bars in 3 days sounds a bit like just Christmas over here, but we'll see about that. But anyway, I'm very quickly going to introduce James Bridle, and I know we're running slightly over, so I'm going to have to ask James to deliver this with lightning speed, and then we can get to the questions.
Hello. Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for those two awesome talks. They're good I think they're going to complement each other well, these things. I wanted to talk about the context of wearables in particular. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is not so much about wearable computing kind of obviously. It's more kind of just where it's at now, which is largely kind of device-based. Really. So I'm going to talk a lot about kind of phones and stuff like that, because that's really where these things that we're talking about live now, but you can see how they're already starting to kind of migrate into other areas of the body or kind of associated with it. You know, because what seems to me significant about these new technologies is not necessarily just that they're wearable or embodied or these kind of things. The primary exciting thing about where technologies are going now is that they're networked. That's their kind of fundamentally interesting concept. That's what kind of smart computation and new technologies kind of rely on, is this connection between things. That's the thing about them that's kind of genuinely new. And the weird kind of paradox of that is that we're actually almost kind of returning to the old computing world of kind of mainframe computers. You know, where you'd have like one huge central thing and you just have these kind of network access terminals that just kind of ping into these much bigger stores elsewhere. So I'm going to talk about wearables in this slightly sort of lazy way, talking about these devices, but I think that the effects of them are kind of the same, and it's the effects that I really want to talk about. This is a picture of the ENIAC, which was the first electronic general-purpose computer that was built at the University of Pennsylvania between 1942 and 1946, critically and rather importantly and interestingly, to do terrifying nuclear stuff. But as you can see, you know, the ENIAC was one of these very early computers, 2 massive rooms covered with valves, incredibly complex technology, and vast. And there was this guy who worked on it, a mathematician called Harry Reid, who wrote this kind of beautiful thing about it. He said the ENIAC itself, strangely, was a very personal computer. Now we think of a personal computer as one which you carry around with you. The ENIAC was actually one that you kind of lived inside. You know, you'd have to kind of crawl into this thing to do stuff. And the thing is, that never ended. We kind of went through this kind of weird middle period where we carried the computation around with us, which we're still kind of at the tail end of now. But actually, ever more, we have been building this larger machine around us. And today, we all live inside the machine in a similar way to what Harry Reid was describing. The machine now extends all the way up to the GPS system, for example. You know, every time you take out your phone and query your location, you're talking to satellites. In many occasions, you're talking to a vast constellation of 32 satellites at kind of 55,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface, this vast machine that we've built, that we're all now living inside, a superstructure that includes kind of satellites, but also includes, you know, all the local networks that we've built around us. And this superstructure kind of repeats down at every level to those little boxes that we're carrying around, these kind of almost wearables, these little kind of iotas of computation, but really just terminals to a kind of larger network, and crucially, kind of illegible as well. You know, these little black boxes, these little shards of glass that we don't necessarily always understand or see what they're doing. This is my favorite app, sorry. Though Foursquare is great too. But City Mapper, for those who don't use it, get it immediately. It's kind of amazing. They don't pay me or anything. But it's just a map. I think there's a New York version as well now, but this is the London one. And it's built by people in London, and it's the best thing for navigating London. And it has fundamentally changed the way that I move around the city, because it's so good at telling me how to get to places. I've gone to parties on the other side of London that before I just would have gone, there's no way I'm going to South London at this time of night. And it's like, no, look, there's a bus here you didn't know about. It's like, wow. My point is, it fundamentally transforms the city itself and the ways in which that we use it. It's an incredibly powerful tool for doing that. You know, Google and Apple are doing the same kind of thing with the maps. Foursquare does the kind of things with its recommendations. These change the way you experience the world around you. They change your actual behaviors. But critically, they do it, and all of them do it, by reliance not just on the thing that you carry with you, but something kind of much larger, something kind of distant and powerful and huge. It asks somewhere like this. This is actually Microsoft's data center in Dublin. Google are building an even bigger one kind of just down the road from it next door. And my point is that this is the kind of inevitable landscape of wearable computing, that it's not just about the body. It's about places like this. Every time I press a button on the, you know, on this little almost irresponsive slab of glass in my pocket, something massive happens here. Mechanical things, lights flicker down cables, hard drives spin up, cooling spins up, you know, the chips kind of hum away with electricity, and almost incomprehensibly vast machinery is activated by this kind of tiny action, which consumes kind of energy and fuel and people. Like, work is being done here. By kind of embodying these things, we're also outsourcing and outboarding a huge amount of our kind of computational needs. And this is mirrored in kind of cognitive ways we behave as well, particularly in our kind of the functions of memory, I particularly feel. So I sort of hate talking about Google Glass, but it is the kind of charismatic megafauna of wearable technologies. It's the one that, you know, because it's out there, even though it's doing stuff that's kind of been available in a bunch of ways already, having it there so physical and obvious allows us to talk about it and to study these things more closely. And there's plenty of debates to be had around the kind of the etiquette of glass and the devices like it, which again, I don't really want to get into, except to emphasize the fact that these things have effects beyond the individual body, that they affect kind of social groups and cities and so on and so forth. We're not isolated bodies floating in space. We exist in an environment that's full of stuff and other people. And placing a computer on the body is not an isolated event either. But really, wearable computers transform the environment by gathering and admitting information to the environment. If you're using glass, for example, everything you take is kind of shared back up to the network instantaneously. And that's true of, you know, stuff that we gather intentionally, whether we take photos intentionally. It's also done kind of largely invisibly and unconsciously, whether that's kind of location tracking through these various devices, whether it's kind of sleep monitoring or exercise monitoring. Technology kind of seeks to optimize these activities in ways that are legible to that technology and are not necessarily directly keyed into the kind of experiences of the body itself. And not always visible to us or comprehensible to us in any way. This is Amazon warehouse. It's the largest, no, actually, I think it might be smaller, the one in Swansea, but this is the one in Rugeley in Staffordshire, built for poetic reasons on the site of an old coal mine. It's vast, it's massive, and the extraordinary thing about this space is it's not human navigable. Amazon utilizes a thing called chaotic storage, which means that you store, so say you've got some books and DVDs. You don't put all the books over there and all the DVDs over there, because no one wants just books or just DVDs, right? And if you do it like that, people have to walk miles to pick those things up. So all the stuff is distributed across the whole space. So you get some books, some DVDs, some of this stuff, all mixed up, which is great and more efficient to go and get it. But that means you need like a guide to go and get it. In fact, Amazon people who work in the warehouse, they all carry around these little terminals that tell them where to go at all times. Those things also track every step they take. They track their loo breaks. They enforce the rather restrictive labor conditions that Amazon employees work under. Because what these things are coded spaces. They're architectures generated by the technology and computation being used there. This is the classical example of what's called a code space. There's a term from social software studies, Rob Kitchen and Martin Dodge. A code space is a space that is co-produced by architecture and computation. So the airport departure lounge being a kind of classic example of the code space. Because if you go there, you know how to act. You go in, you give over your details, someone logs you in, you pass through. But if the software fails, the whole space fails, right? It transforms from being an airport departure lounge into a kind of massive shed full of angry people. The two can't function unless they're working together. Wearables and other portable technologies transform everything into a code space. This is a terminal worn by workers in a Tesco warehouse in Ireland. The effects of this are both to optimize the worker's performance in gathering and shipping packages. It's also the basis for the labor dispute they're currently in with their employers, because it monitors, lunch breaks, loo breaks, and prevents them socializing, which restricts their ability to kind of unionize and work for better labor conditions. These have those flippy effects. Tesco has an iPhone app, right? For when you order your food online, right? So that device, that app, in combination with the wearable at the other end of the scale, transforms your phone into like a remote control device for other human beings. Every time you order something through one of those little 36 pixel squares on your phone, you're kind of reaching out through the network in this incredibly powerful and actually quite physical way. Things move because of you. Hard disks spin up and people set off on little journeys around warehouses far away. You're part of this code space as well every time we interact with these things. So wearable computing kind of codes the world around it, and it generates these architectures which support forms of kind of augmented human activity and experience over, regular ones. And I don't want to call them natural. I don't want to say that this is automatically like a bad thing, and I'm not here to make a kind of Luddite argument. But I want to make sure that we put them in the context in which they operate very carefully. Hardware, as we see in wearables, is kind of going the way that we've watched software and interfaces go over the last 20 years. Kind of gone from the complexity but the intense malleability of the command line, where you can have full control over the machine that you're using, to the kind of iOS-style, touchy, wobbly, kind of fluffy interactions that we now have, which actually restrict our agency as users in order to kind of demand what we would like from this computation. None of this is necessarily bad, providing we keep up with kind of literacy and understanding and the metaphors which empower us rather than disempower us in the use and design of these technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, James. If we can get you to sit down, and I want to ask a few questions. Those were all excellent talks. So it feels like if a lot of biologists at the moment will tag, if they want to track the behavior of animals, for example, seals, they will tag them with these little electronic devices. They'll stick them onto their skin and be able to study them. It feels slightly like we're sort of doing that, but we're not the biologists. People like Amazon and Google are. And I wanted to see to what extent you agree with that and whether you think that's a problem. And I want to start with James there.
Okay. The problem is simply in the question of where the kind of the power and the rewards for this lies. I have no problem with kind of the optimization, the augmentation that's done here, but we should be very careful about the benefits that accrue and where they accrue, essentially. I think particularly when you see it with something like Google's work, everyone who uses Google is essentially performing labor from Google. They are generating value for Google. And that's fine if they're getting everything that they get out of it. But the wider and wider these nets are cast, the kind of cheaper I feel that we're selling our own information. If we're genuinely going to live in a kind of like magical digital future where we all kind of, have wonderful creative jobs and this kind of stuff, we need to work out the balance of the value of that rather more carefully, I think.
David, what would you have to say about that?
No, I think that's exactly really very close to the way I think about it, and I think the way that people at Foursquare think about it. Yeah, certainly, I mean, the concerns over what we're giving up in exchange for what we're getting back are discussed often, and it's something that we discuss on a regular basis, and we're very careful about that. I think in general, yeah, it's a matter of the fact that there is this tremendous power in large-scale data sets and how they can improve our life and just present us with information we would have never otherwise been able to realize without sort of an aggregate understanding. And I think that it's exciting to see people opening up to this technology in a way that maybe doesn't illustrate the same care that James is suggesting we should take, and I think we all should take. But it's kind of this exciting free-for-all almost, where I think a lot of young people are kind of saying, you know what, like I'm gonna open a lot of myself up to this because I think the benefits are there and because it is an exciting time. And certainly important to consider it, but I also think that a lot of the innovation we're seeing right now is probably a result of people being very willing to share and more willing than ever before.
Clara, I'd like to ask the same question to you.
I completely agree with James. And I think it's very interesting that we are here and we talk about this, but the best thing would be to actually help people that don't work in technology to understand this, and to visualize where all their data go to, so that at that point I think they can make an informed decision of what they want to do with it and how they want the reward to be structured.
Yeah, because a few years ago we had the European cookie legislation got implemented, whereby websites had to declare, upfront, have an opt-in option for people to tell them, oh, we're dropping cookies, and we're going to be tracking you for advertising purposes. And I think the issue there was that, first of all, most people didn't know what a cookie was, a browser cookie, and then so they had to first of all do an education job of this is what a cookie is, and then, oh, by the way, we've been tracking you all this time, but we didn't really tell you about it, and now do you want to opt in or not? And I feel like there's something of that issue with wearables. I mean, to what extent do you think that people do know how, what's being done with their data, how much data is being collected, David?
I think that right now it's a self-selecting population. Anyone who's in this room who's wearing some kind of device, I hope, has an understanding and an appreciation for what they're giving to that device, what they're giving to the manufacturer, and also what they're getting back. So I think that the folks that are early adopters for this right now, I don't think it's a major issue, but I don't know.
Does anyone else have anything to add on that point?
I don't know. I mean, I'd be really interested to know in which kind of future ways of what we can do at the hardware and software level to kind of mitigate or change this in some way. Because in a lot of ways, these kind of social pressures are formed by the design of the hardware, kind of reproduced in the world, and business pressures as well. So, for example, I think in the latest Foursquare, they've removed private check-ins. Is that correct? That you can no longer do private check-ins because essentially, that's not conducive to the social features that Foursquare would like to be building into the device, which is fine, and it's the necessary kind of evolution of the service. But it shows that a lot of these benefits are only possible when we do them within certain business contexts that then reproduce the social effect that is required more by the business than by certain individual desires. So, are there other forms that we can kind of design and generate that mitigate or change that?
Sorry, did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say that potentially the advantage of wearables, so hardware wearable, is that maybe people will understand more that there is a sort of collecting, by making it physical, it maybe shows more what digitally is happening.
Okay. I want to ask this question quite quickly to all of you, but I want you to each tell me what the best example of wearables and the worst example that you've seen so far is, and a brief description as to why. And I'm going to start with you, Clara.
No. So I really like the beacon. I really like when wearable is really inconspicuous and very versatile. So the little beacon that is a sort of a tracker for things, I think is interesting, and you can use it as you want it. And then I really liked the if this then that, when they sort of branched out to physical, also in the virtual world, but when they branched out to physical, I felt that was allowing the users to customize the functions. And that, in my opinion, is the recipe for success, and showing it as the best example. The worst example, oh God, it's difficult. Sorry. Okay. So if this then that is a platform online that allows you to connect different services. So potentially you can say, if I receive a Facebook message, then send me a text message on my phone, or then post something on my Twitter status. So you can link different apps. Am I saying it correctly? Different apps online. But they also branched out in the physical world. So now you can have a socket that is connected to the internet, and then when you receive a Facebook message, then a lights in your house goes on. Now, this is a bit of a stupid example, but you can imagine how maybe you can customize the functions that you want this physical object in the real world and the digital app in the virtual world to be doing for you. And the thing that I appreciate is the customization. So the fact that you decide what these things are doing rather than having an object that does one thing and one thing only. You can change these things with time and with your needs.
Did that answer your question? And okay, we've got a few minutes, but I need to get the worst example from you quickly. One word.
Let me think about it.
Okay, James.
Best, I'll give 2 bracelets to be quick. The best is my mate who took the RFID chip out of his Oyster card and made it into a really lovely bracelet because it's really useful, it's always there. It's also bounded. You know, the thing about RFID, it only works that closely, so it's not like a tracking device in the same way. The worst being the Nike Fuel Band, which I think makes everyone look like they belong to some kind of weird cult. And I don't know what fuel points mean. And yeah, that.
Yeah, I'll say the worst first. To me, the worst is anything that requires you. It's really a class. I'm not going to speak to a specific device because that would be a conflict of interest probably. But the worst is probably anything that forces you to tell a device about something you're doing in the real world that is not like a seamless thing. So I hate having to tell a band what I just ate for lunch and how many calories that was. To me, that's like we're going 10 steps backwards. The best, I think, are devices that get rid of a proprietary focus, which I think, you know, the Fuel Band is probably the leading proprietary platform in that sense, and kind of give us just really raw biometric data, so heart rate, galvanic skin response, you know, our perspiration levels, things like that, and kind of allow us to open it up and see really what's happening to our own bodies in a little bit more of a neutral, objective way.
I remember when I used the Fitbit, which is a kind of activity tracker. When I cycled, it didn't register anything because it wasn't moving. So I had to actually put it on my boot so that it would kind of register some sort of movement. It's because it would only work normally when you're walking, which is extraordinary. My final question was, what do you see as a single biggest challenge faced by the wearables community? And I want to start with you, David.
I think it's going to be maintaining consumer interest if hardware doesn't advance quickly enough, because I think that a lot of people are already getting a little jaded about what these devices are doing for them, the current kind of slate out there, and they're going to have to kind of maintain that interest and maintain the excitement while they match pace.
For me, it's communication. It's how to what extent the things that we're building express their function in a way that's legible to users.
I think as everyone rushes to make hardwares, I think we need to keep our mind clear and make sure that we don't produce things that are not needed. Now that a hardware will be connected to a software, will become obsolete quite quickly, and then we need new hardwares and new software and all the time. So we need to keep clear and not overproduce objects.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we didn't have any time for any more questions, but thank you to the panel.